Frameless packs are like the hot pockets of pack choices. You're taking something that's too often overbuilt, like pizza or Philly cheesesteak, and reducing it down to its most effective and simplest form. Does that analogy work? It doesn't matter. Today, let's run through 5 reasons why I use frameless packs and why you should maybe, just maybe, consider adding one to your gear closet as well. First up, and we will start with the easy one, is of course weight. Frameless packs are on average lighter than their framed counterparts. And this makes sense because framed packs and frameless packs, assuming that we're talking about the lightweight or ultralight variety, are really just sacks on your back. And the design between the two is pretty much the same. The only real difference is that framed packs usually have a frame sheet or a stay of some kind that runs down the back panel. Now, before we get in too deep, I do want to point out that there are definitely some very lightweight framed options out there these days. So if you want to go ultralight but not sure if you want to give up a frame, you still definitely have that option. For instance, Gossamer Gear and Z-Packs both make very lightweight framed backpacks. However, on the other end of that spectrum, you have something like the Z-Packs Nero, which is a frameless backpack, and that weighs an incredible 10 ounces. So no matter how you slice it, the absolute lightest packs are always going to be frameless. That said, I don't think that everyone should start their ultralight journey by ripping the frame out of their backpack. There are lots of other places that you can lighten up, like your sleeping bag or your shelter, that are gonna have as much, if not more, of a difference on your overall base weight than the pack itself. What I normally tell people is to pick a target base weight that you're shooting for and then design your gear setup around that. So hey, if you want a base weight of around 15 pounds, let's say, you probably don't need to go with a frameless pack, and a framed option would work just fine for you. But again, if you want the absolute lightest of the light, then framed is where it's at. Number 2, and bear with me because this one's gonna seem a little bit weird, but I promise I will explain, is a lower weight capacity. I understand how this can seem like a negative, but it's actually very much a positive, especially if you're hiking longer distances. A frameless pack is definitely gonna let you know if you have too much weight in it. You're gonna put it on and you're gonna be like, oh my God, this is horrible. And the nice thing about that is that over longer trips, your body is gonna be much happier with you because you were forced to carry less weight. It's kind of the same reason that you see hikers wearing minimalist shoes. If you go too hard or too fast, they definitely will start hurting your feet. But the nice thing about that is that it forces you to slow down and prevents other, possibly more serious injuries down the line. This definitely can be a negative if you are in the habit of overloading your backpacks, because again, it's not going to be comfortable at all if you have like 40 pounds in it. But if you're using the pack the way that it's designed, you're going to have a nice light setup and your body's going to thank you over the long run. Compare this to a framed pack, where it feels more comfortable with lots of weight in it than a frameless pack, so you end up carrying all of that weight. And while you're comfortable in the short term, over the long term, your knees and your ankles and your feet all start to hurt, and it possibly ruins your trip. Next up at number 3, and this is very important to me personally, is simplicity. I tend to favor uncomplicated designs in all things. I don't know, I just like to keep it simple. And I found that simpler designs tend to be more durable and more easily repaired in the field. There's really not much to a frameless pack that you can actually break. And if you get a hole in it, you just stick a piece of DCF tape on it and you're good to go. Compare this to a framed pack that has carbon fiber stays, and those actually can and do break sometimes. The last thing that I personally want while I'm out on the trail is a pack with a broken frame. Also, the simpler the design, the less you have to mess with it. I used to have this Granite gear pack that I absolutely loved. It was a great pack, and it had a movable hip belt that was attached to the back panel with a screw. And while the design was great, it was incredibly comfortable, and you could move that hip belt around so that you could dial in the sizing just right. Every time I took a step, the screw point where it attached would squeak. So here I am, hiking through this beautiful Pacific Northwest forest, and squeak, 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 every single step. I tried all sorts of different things to fix it, but ultimately it was just squeaky. Once I got a frameless pack, no more squeak. Next up at number 4, and possibly the most controversial, is comfort. Like I said earlier, frameless packs can be uncomfortable if you overload them. Also, some people find the lack of breathability of a framed pack, since it rests right up against your back, to be uncomfortable. I just personally love the way that it conforms to my body. Since it doesn't have a back panel, you normally end up putting your sleeping pad or something like that down the back to give it a little bit of structure. And since it's not completely solid, it normally has quite a bit of flex and give to it, which is really nice when you're scrambling or trying to go over downed trees or something like that. And also, like I mentioned earlier, since you're not tempted to overload this kind of pack, your feet and your knees are going to be much more comfortable as well. If you're considering going with a frameless pack and comfort is something that's very important to you, I would recommend seeing if you can find something that has load lifters. None of my frameless packs do, but I know that Waymark makes them, and there's a couple of other companies that do as well. I think the Evolved packs do. But one of the things that I have noticed with frameless packs is that when I have them fully loaded and the load's coming up relatively high on my back, it tends to tip backwards. So it would be nice to have something that kind of pulls that weight forward. And finally, and this is the most important to many of us, is price. All things being equal, frameless packs are just generally cheaper. And this makes sense. They're less complicated, so they require less material to make and less labor. Of course, there are always exceptions. You can find some incredibly expensive frameless packs, but for the most part, this seems to hold pretty true. You can go onto the Mountain Laurel Designs website, for instance, and pick up a frameless pack for around $200, depending on what material you want. Whereas if you were to go to your nearest REI and pick up a framed pack, you'd probably be looking at more like $300. Again, there are always going to be exceptions to every rule, but overall, that's what you can expect. Of course, a frameless pack is no good if you can't pack it properly, so make sure to check out this video next. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.